We are delighted to have in our studios this morning a familiar face, Jon Comstock, who is a candidate for the Arkansas Legislature's House District 96. Now, that's primarily eastern Benton County. And, Jon, by golly, you've tossed your hat in the ring again.
Yes, I have. Well, everybody knows that Grant Hodges was our state representative, right, and he did a fine job, but he decided not to run again.
Right.
So it was an open seat. And I had run for public office before and had some ideas about being a representative in the legislature, and just saw this opening and felt like I wanted to step forward again. People that know me know that I do a tremendous amount of volunteer work for our community, and I really just want to take that to a, people use the phrase higher level, but that's what I really want to do. I want to be a voice for people in the legislature.
Well, Jon, a lot of people know you, and I will tell you up front that you're a popular guy, really. Got some good ideas and a smart fella. And I think, first of all, this morning, we ought to mention some, some dates here, because we've got some deadlines coming up to do certain things, don't we? Like
Yes.
Register.
Absolutely.
Why don't you go over that?
Okay, thank you. Folks need to know the last day to register to vote for this election. The election is November 3rd, but you have until October 5th to register. So people need to get that done. The other thing to keep in mind and put on your calendar is early voting is going to start October 19th. And I would just say this: if you're concerned about the COVID virus, and you're concerned about those long lines at voting on election day, take advantage of early voting. My family, we have kind of a tradition where my stepson, his girlfriend, my wife, and others, we meet at the first day of early voting, and we're going to do it again October 19th. We meet to vote, and then if we can, we all go try to join each other for breakfast or some shared meal at that point. Anyway, make it a family event if you can. October 19th, early voting starts. And the last thing I would say about absentee ballots, if you don't want to go to the polls at all, or you don't want to go to the county clerk's office, you can right now apply for an absentee ballot. You have to go online to the county clerk's website, but you can fill out that absentee ballot online. You can email it to the clerk, and their directions are all there on their website to tell you how to do it, or you can mail it back into them. But you want to do that now, because it takes a week or so to get a turnaround from the time they get your application till the time they get the ballot back to you. And then you have to remember that ballot, when you mail it back in, it has to be received by the county clerk by election day, not postmarked. You know, like when we pay our taxes, as long as it gets postmarked by April 15th, we're in good shape. No, you can't go to the post office and get it postmarked November 3rd and think you've accomplished your vote. It won't get to the county clerk in time. So you've got to give them time to get it there.
Yeah, what you're saying here is applicable to Arkansas. And there's confusion because a lot of states are having things, handling it differently. I know I was watching one report yesterday where some state is going to count the ballots for up to, say, 10 days or so after the election. And but that's not the case in Arkansas. So what you're saying right now is, if somebody's concerned about maybe crowded conditions on polling day, on the election day, November 3rd, that they ought to request their absentee ballot right now.
Right now.
And just as soon as they get the thing, fill it out and get the vote and mail it in.
Absolutely. The September 18th, which I believe is this Friday, the county clerk, based on applications that they've already received, absentee ballot applications, they're going to start mailing out actual ballots. And when you get that ballot, there's going to be really precise instructions that tell you what to do. For instance, there's going to be an envelope that's going to say ballot on it, and that ballot is in there. And it's pretty straightforward as to how you complete that ballot. But again, the county clerk's office will certainly answer any questions that folks might have. I would say, if you're worried about the COVID virus, which I think is a reasonable thing to be concerned about, take advantage of that early voting.
Sure.
As well. October 19th it starts, and it goes right up until the day before the election.
Now, Jon, do you have any idea where the places will be where you can early vote? For example, starting on the 19th, how many polling places do we have?
You know what? I think there's about 10 places that you can early vote on, but I would say this. Again, there are 2 lists on the county clerk's website, and they actually tell you the early voting sites, and they tell you the sites that are available on the day of the election, because on the day of the election, there's a lot more sites available. Early voting, it's a more restricted number. But certainly our big county clerk's offices, like the office on Walnut Avenue in Rogers and the main administration building downtown at the courthouse, those are available.
Yeah, and this first date that we talked about here, the last day that you can register is October 5th.
October 5th.
So people who are not registered, and let's say somebody that hasn't voted in 4 or 5 years, probably needs to register, don't they?
Needs to register, and they need to go if they don't know if they're registered, go to a website called VoterView. I think it's voterview.org. Voter VOTER view VIEW.org, and you can then put in your address and information, and it'll pop up and tell you whether you are registered to vote. What I have learned from the county clerk's office with regards to absentee ballots that they've already received, because when they receive them, they're trying to review them for adequacy to see if they've complied with the requirements. And both in Washington and Benton County, they are rejecting some ballots. The primary reason that they're rejecting a ballot is because a person is not actually registered to vote. And I'm thankful that our county clerks in both counties tell me that they're reaching out to the individuals and trying to correct that problem before October 5th so that they can get these people properly registered to vote.
Well, you know, John, we here at KURM Radio just urge everybody to vote, and I tell you, it kind of rubs me the wrong way when I see a lot of people wanting to be real persnickety about throwing ballots out and, the signature wasn't exactly right and this sort of thing. It looks like that we've got kind of a feeling that we want to keep people from voting at times, and I don't like that.
I don't like it either, and I feel the same way. I feel like it's odd to me. I used to wonder, because when I was in even as far back as college, and Colonel, I've been around a long time because I graduated from law school in 1975 and have been practicing since then. But I took comparative governments as one of the course studies that I did in political science, and I remember studying about the Russian Constitution. And 2 things stood out to me that I just haven't been able to let go of. One, their Constitution is worded beautifully, just beautifully. It's got wonderful, wonderful concepts and ideas in it. And we know what that means. Words are not necessarily worth the paper they're written on unless you really give allegiance to them. And then secondly, they have one of the highest voting turnouts of any nation, on the planet. How do they do that? Well, of course, they number one, they declare it a holiday. And they give people all the opportunity to get to the polls, but I'm sure they do some other things to encourage you to vote. But still, in this country, I've always been surprised that people have to figure out a way to slip off from work for an hour or 2, and then they don't know how long they're going to be gone because they don't know about that line. And a lot of folks are in employment precarious positions where they can't just leave anytime they want to. Not everybody is self-employed. The hourly workers just don't have the luxury that a lot of us do when it comes to voting. So I wished our state would get behind an initiative that would really make it easier for people to vote.
Yeah, now I noticed that some of our employers are giving the people time off to vote, like Walmart, I think. Is
Absolutely.
Doing that. That's wonderful.
Yes, it is. In fact, that's what you call leadership.
Sure.
And in my mind, not that because I mentioned legislation, and I think legislation is appropriate, but where legislation, as we know, legislation should reflect our values that already exist. We don't create values most of the time by legislation. We're really what we're doing is we're building a stronger foundation around a particular value. So when you get a company like Walmart that shows leadership of letting its vast number of even hourly employees take off time to vote, that should encourage other employers and legislators. Let's say, how do we maximize that and get that available for everybody?
Now, John, I would think that you would agree with me this morning that while we encourage everybody to vote, we encourage them to vote only once.
Exactly. Right. I've heard somebody say recently he wanted them to vote twice or even more often if they could.
All right, John, let's talk a little bit about your race now. And I guess the first question is, why are you running?
I'm running for the same reason I did a couple years ago when I ran for the state senate, because I'm 70 years old. I'm impatient for change. I'm impatient with the status quo. I read the paper like a lot of people do. I try to stay up with the news, and I just see things going on in the legislature, and I disagree with it. And I think a lot of other people too do as well, based on my conversations with them. I would say one of the things I want to do, the mark I want to make, is I want to be the best representative that District 96 has had. And by that I mean, I mentioned, I think to you earlier, that legislators call it constituent services when a legislature helps a citizen navigate their way with a state agency or bureaucracy or whatever. I want to be superior at that job. I want people after 2 years to say to themselves, we've never had a legislator work as hard for us as individuals as Jon Comstock did. That's my goal. I want to really be, I call it, I started to say I call it servant leadership, but that's a phrase I got from Walmart. I was there for 18 years in their legal department, and servant leadership is tossed around a lot, but I will tell you that it's tossed around in a meaningful way. And servant leadership really does mean that you do things for the benefit of others. And Colonel, all I can tell you and the listeners is, if anybody studies me, they'll see that's what I do day in and day out. I spend about 15-20% of my time doing mediations, where I get hired by attorneys and their clients to help them settle litigation, and I'm good at it, and I like it. But I spend about 40 to 60% of my time doing volunteer legal work for people who cannot afford paying an attorney. And I'm fortunate to be at a point in my life where I can do that. My wife makes it possible for me to do that, and I appreciate her. People always say, John, you're such a good guy because you do this volunteer work. And I always remind them, hey, my wife makes it possible because she continues to work.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's good that you credit her, for doggone sure. Now, let's talk a little bit about your background. You mentioned you were at Walmart for a number of years in their legal department. But go back ahead of that and
well, before
people.
that, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. For about 18 years, I was an attorney in private practice in Tulsa. Most of those years, or at least 10 of those years, I represented all of the small cities in northeastern Oklahoma, with the exception of Tulsa and Broken Arrow, because they had their own legal departments. But when cities got sued, when police officers got sued for doing what they considered to be their job, I defended those police officers routinely in court on a day-in, day-out basis. Almost every small town that you can think of in northeastern Oklahoma. Then I went to work for Walmart. They had become a client of mine for a multiple number of years, and I went to work for them doing commercial litigation, appearing in federal courts all across the country. And then I had the privilege of being appointed to be a circuit court judge in Benton County. A judge, David Klinger, a great judge, retired early, and his position was open, and the governor appointed me to fill that spot from 2011 to 2012. That was a wonderful experience. I had the felony criminal docket, and I will say to you and the listeners, it also opened my eyes about a lot of the inadequacies in our criminal justice system, and I frankly have not been able to let it go. I stay focused on trying to work for improvements in that system that we have. And then I might have mentioned to you that I was hired by the University of Arkansas School of Law for 5, 6, 7 semesters. I've taught conflict resolution. I've taught the law students basically how to be what I call peacemakers. And I like that term because that's what I do as a mediator. And I like it also. I have on my syllabus for the law school, I have a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and I don't have it memorized, but essentially it's, hey, there's lots of litigation to go around. You don't need to foment disputes. You don't need to aggravate cases. Try to resolve cases. And resolving cases is what I do regularly.
I think back on, because of your background and the things I've observed with Jon Comstock, is that if you are elected, you are going to spend the necessary time really working for your constituents.
Absolutely. I tell my wife, I think she was talking to me about different things that maybe I could do if I got elected to the legislature. And I told her, I said, well, keep in mind, I'm going to be a full-time, part-time legislator. because I am going to dig in. One thing I will do, folks, if you're listening to me and if I get the opportunity to represent you, is there's not an issue too small, and I mean it, not an issue too small, that if you come to me with a problem with the state government, agency, whatever, I'm going to dig into it with you and collaborate with you and help you resolve that problem. That's what I want to do.
Well, John, our time has come and gone here this morning, and we'll be talking on subsequent programs here about some of your specific ideas. But again, a reminder that people need to register to vote. By golly, if you haven't registered to vote, if you're not a regular voter, then October 5th is the deadline there. So get that registration in. And how do they do that?
They do it actually by just going down to the county clerk's office at the main courthouse or going to the annex there. Actually, it may be called the main election center on South Walnut, which is just within a few blocks of where the old where the tag agency is on South Walnut. It's a very simple process. The application just requires 5, 6, 7 questions to be answered. And you go in, and the same day you fill out the application, you're registered to vote.
Now, we have some organizations like the League of Women Voters that occasionally have mobile registration sites. Do we have any of those coming up?
Yes. Well, in fact, they've done several in our area, and I believe this Saturday, it just so happens I was on a phone call yesterday, I think this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in front of the Hibachi Grill, there in front of the Walmart on South Walnut, the League of Women Voters. I think it's the League. If it's not, it might be the Democrat Party of Benton County. Somebody is going to be there conducting a voter registration drive.
Well, we encourage people to get registered. And then early voting starting on October 19th, so be sure to take advantage of that if you are concerned about the coronavirus and the fact that things might be congested on Election Day. Hey, it's an opportunity for you to go in there, and I will promise you that we'll get our news department here to get a list of all of those sites where people can register or can vote in Benton County early, and we'll publicize that.
And I'd be glad to send you that link so you can easily do that. It'll be from the county clerk's office.
All right. Jon Comstock, candidate for Arkansas Legislature's House District 96, a special guest this morning. And, John, we wish you the very best. Your website is www.jon, that's Jon, Comstock, JONCOMSTOCK, forarkansas.com.
Yes.
And our thanks to you, and we've got some other interviews scheduled. I know we'll see you
absolutely
from time to time.
And I really look forward to talking about specific ideas and things of that nature.
All right. We look forward to that as well.
Thank
Jon
you, Carl.
Comstock this morning, the preceding a paid political conversation.